Mario Cosio Olvade. He's at the University of Salamanca and the University of Minnesota, and he will be talking about Transcripta manent, AI and handwritten text recognition applied to medieval Spanish manuscripts. So we stay within the same theme.
Yes,
so.
Thank you. And I will present the thanking to everyone, the organization, because I have to rush. I was planning on a 15-minute talk and now it's 10. So I'm going to talk about experiences. I'm going to talk about the challenges encountered, the workflow, and something about large language models. I think Jose Manuel has covered a bit of what we do. We work with this transcription system that is fairly simple. It works with ASCII. ASCII, which was developed in the 60s, I think, for telegraphic communication. And then, well, it's integrated into one of the largest Spanish database, medieval Spanish databases that has like 40 million tokens. And this is a transcription using that system, basically. If you see, there's the major and minor signs that lock anything that is abbreviated. There's other things like percentage signs for the pilcrows, I think that you call them in English, or the pilcrows. In other texts, if you have nesting levels, then you will have the I that is nested or the R that is not. The Tironian sign will be abbreviated with a specific sign. The cedil will be abbreviated with an apostrophe, things that are really basic, which allows us to work then in basic TXT files. And then some characteristics of the codified text will appear also, like rubrication. We have a mnemonic for rubrication and for capitals. Yes, and the capitals that follow it. Overall, the system performs really well in Transkribus. This is one model that, this is a transcription of one of the latest models that I trained, where the highlighted texts are mistakes. The rest is perfect. There's not a single mistake. So, and upon closer examination, all of these errors are unrelated to the paleographic encoding. They are all related to the words. There's consonants that appear, A, I, U, etc. Models of this nature, and here we see its data, offer a much needed level of accuracy necessary for correcting and distinguishing a common feature of medieval writing that I'm going to make a lot of emphasis during these minutes, which is the use of different abbreviation markings by different scribes, like what we see here. These are all the same abbreviation for different values. So initially, let's get out of here. All or this same word abbreviated in different ways. So initially I started training transcription models in the now defunct HTR+, and we had really, really good percentages. So my logic was anything above 3% is bad. So we tried to lower it. The Spanish models that we see here, they were trained on rather small text, like 20 bifolios. 106, in one of the cases we have I think that 1.5, the Spanish Gothic 1.5 has 166,000 words, 22,000 lines, which is a whole manuscript. But then we had other manuscripts copied by the same hand. So it was fairly good and accurate to the transcription. And it reduced the time considerably. What it took me to train it, which was, I think, a couple of months, because I had to do the transcription and correct it, was reduced to 30 hours, to 30 hours of correction post-transcription with Transkribus. Other models are a bit more modest. I'm not going to talk about all of that. But something that we do know, is that the accuracy level has changed from HDR Plus to Pilaya. We have seen the decrease. And models developed with this engine require a much higher volume of input text to achieve a similar level of accuracy. So I trained 3 additional models now in Pilaya, which I think are this, when we could train with 1,000 epochs in the expert client. And the models had comparable results with HDR+, but the number of words was much, much higher. When we reduced the number of training epochs, then we saw an impact. I think that you have probably observed as well. The accuracy of the models is different, and now it requires a much higher input of text and words to achieve the comparable result. So currently I'm working with 2 models that you see here. One is 7P, which is for his project, and one that is Lucidario, which is for a project that I'm developing. And well, it doesn't matter what the texts are themselves, but we see that in some cases, we are going to note jumps in accuracy. So in some cases, there's models that from one version to the following jump in error, which shouldn't happen, and identified that these higher than normal errors in validation were resulted from a problem that I'm going to address right now with the identification of lines tool and the process itself, which identified lines in the folios used for the validation. So in the text, if we see not the CER in validation, but the CER in the training, that does go down. But what doesn't go down is the validation, because the validation set was imperfect already in the lines, in the baselines. So this is what started happening, right? I don't know where I am, but we start having this type of lines that explode. So then let's now discuss something that I said, one of the major challenges encountered with working with medieval manuscripts, and I welcome suggestions in this topic. All these issues have to do with the textual features of the manuscript mise en page and contribute to slower work in transcription and in perfecting a model that working with modern printed texts. The first has to do with the decorative items present in manuscripts, which can be erroneously, as here, identified as line texts. In this image, we see, well, I'm not going to do the lines, but we have a lot of lines that are going nowhere because the capital is just messing the transcription. In other cases, we have marks left by the readers, and that also can be challenging. Some of them are not as challenging as others because they start to incorporate into the text, and that makes impractical to do text recognition, region recognition. So we have to do the simple thing and do it manually. And that's what I do. Basically, I do manual things. And then if it doesn't work and if it keeps projecting, well, we have the cutting tool, and then we'll have to do it manually. So we have to trim the lines. And this new image is basically that with the trim lines. A third issue comes from the diversity of the medieval scripts, that regardless of the volume, that text that we might input, the letters can always surprise us. So this phenomenon is not exclusive to machines, and it can even trick expert human transcribers. Many of us have transcribed something, think this is accurate, and then we have seen it one day later and we said, what were we thinking? Like, for example, this medieval author that I'm not going to mention, but he's talking about the mistakes that copyists make. So such variation is compounded by the mistakes of the scribes that also affects transcribers to a lesser degree. The common thing, like transcribers is misinterpreting, is it penitence or is it penitence? Is it a C or a T? Is it hierro, mistake, or perro, a dog? Is it pedos, a fart, or is it pechos, bosom? We don't know. Well, we do know, Transkribus doesn't. So I wanted to go back and explain why the increase in CRs. If we see the model 0.6, and I don't know which one, the 0.6 Lucidario, 7P to 0.5, there's a mistake. This first one, there's a jump, and it had catastrophic results. And this is the transcription that happened. Everything highlighted is a mistake. What happened? There was a new scribe. So we had to account for a second scribal hand. And the second scribe didn't use the abbreviations with the same values as the first scribe, which is a common thing. So, and in some cases, we'll find manuscripts that are copied in two different hands that are similar, but not quite, Gothic, but not quite. And the recommended approach we know is to do trainings in all representative folios with different hands. You cannot account for all of them. And as a transcriber, you don't know which text has how many hands, because you have to read the text. You have to go through the whole text. And then, yeah, this is a different hand because there's a slight inclination. There's more cursivity. There's a different values for abbreviations. So, and then you have other problems, right? The same scribe can alter his handwriting, light, tiredness, lack of food. He has to finish a work. So he has to sharpen a quill. Well, that's not it. He has to sharpen a quill. That's it. This is the same scribe in 4 different variations. Only a complete line by line will correct this. So, and then you have something that we haven't talked at all almost in these conferences, which is the dialectal nature of language, which is this was found in one of the manuscripts that I was working. That is not Spanish, it's Spanish, but with the dialectal marks of one of the dialects of the north of Spain. Graphically, they're clear, so they didn't pose a challenge to Transkribus. This did, because Transkribus thought, oh, well, that's the normal ending of Spanish words, E-R-O-N. but the problem is that it is not. I thought that it was that, and then it's O-N. So it's a dialectal mark. So we have to retrain it, and actually I did, and then someone said yesterday, Transkribus is unyielding. Yes, it corrected many things that I did wrong. So I'm drawing to a close. I have 11 seconds. I'm going to take 50 more because I have one more page. And I want to discuss large language models. And keeping in mind that what I just said about the diversity of medieval writing. The omnibus models that we're seeing and hand-specific models have different publics, right? One is for high-volume transcriptions where accuracy is not as important because you can data mine that information, but the other ones are tailored to specific manuscripts and a limited number of them. However, one might say, well, we don't need perfection for this type of work. But if we're going to do certain type of work, which is not necessarily historic, but more philological in nature, we do. Because if we start applying global transcription models to manuscripts, they have disastrous results. This is mainly because they overlook fundamentals, two different fundamentals. The first is that language is not firm, it's not synchronic. It doesn't happen just now. Spanish from now is different than Spanish from the 13th century in Madrid, but Spanish in Madrid in the 13th century was different than Spanish in Toledo in the 13th century. So then we have to account into that. And considering that difference in the status of language between the 13th and the 19th century and the modern language, this happens all before one language is normalized, like the Académie Française, la Royal Academy of Spanish. So we need to think more diachronically, and that's what I propose to, with what we're doing with Jose Manuel, is to develop area-specific. But even that, we'll have to go further and probably develop dialectally specific language models, because if we're working with a specific area, geographical, that produces a lot, that has a lot of text, and we introduce it into a larger model that has many more other texts with a different dialectal variety, then we lose it. It dilutes in the, and also the transcription models are not different. They're deeply personal, and expanding or resolving abbreviation is also a personal task. It will depend on the hand. So I think that's it. And I just wanted to finish with this, which is silent battle in Spanish. In Spanish, this is all the noblemen. In Spanish philology, we resolve this as men because it's a fossilized Latin thing, right? The problem is that, and this is what large transcription models do. They do omnes, men. However, some manuscripts have hombres, not like as a fully developed word. There's not a single stance. I found this in 30 manuscripts. I found this in 2. I had to go through 30, I had to go through 2. And so everyone develops omnes, but we should actually develop it as hombres. And then there's a paradox. Using the current transcribing models, in all the Spanish manuscripts from the 13th to the 16th century, we won't find any men. We'll only find everyone, if you allow me the Latin joke. And thank you very much for your patience and for the extra minutes.
Well, given some miscommunication, this session is going to be slightly longer. Is there a small question one would ask? Or do you want to keep it for the break? We have one more presentation to come, which is going to be online. Anyone who wants to ask a short question? Or I guess you will get the questions during the...
Yes, I think you already answered, because as an Italian paleographer, when you started to suggest to run through a corpora of kind of vocabulary, I was a bit confused because I never find the same word written in the same way in my documents. But I think you already explained it. But how are you going to fix that? So I think usually I train models exactly on what is written, but with abbreviation, you clearly need a large model, language model, to understand the context. If you don't want to do that manually, probably.
Yeah, well, usually there's a portion that is done by the person. So usually in the first ground truth that you set up, you will find some, and this is one of the problems that Transkribus cannot resolve, is what's the value of this abbreviation for describe? Because if it's hombres with an N or with an N, that will depend on the manuscript, if the manuscript says it fully. But if Transkribus is trained on the ground truth that says that the N version is more common, it will push it through, falsifying the real data. Well, thank you. Thank you.
So